Good evening from wherever you're watching us from. This is the Big Ten on Metropol TV. I am Nina Shaban, and today to help me go through the Big Ten stories and to properly expound is Fred Asira, who is a political commentator. So let the countdown begin. All right, now, the political crisis over the United Kingdom's planned exit from the European Union deepened further this week after the British Parliament began a month-long suspension that was ordered by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson in an apparent bid to stop MPs blocking the Brexit strategy. And Johnson asked Queen Elizabeth II, who is the British head of state, to shutter Parliament for 5 weeks from last Tuesday, claiming it was necessary ahead of the rolling out a new domestic agenda. Now, the unusually long suspension, known as prorogation, was widely seen as a bid to thwart opposition to a no-deal departure on the October 31st Brexit date, and provoked uproar across the political spectrum as well as legal challenges. Lawmakers opposed to a no-deal Brexit and said it was clearly aimed at hobbling their efforts to prevent such a scenario, while it is also prompted several so far unsuccessful court challenges. Parliament passed a law earlier this month aimed at preventing a no-deal Brexit, but Johnson is adamant Britain will still leave the EU on schedule on the 31st of October with or without a withdrawal agreement. Britain's parliamentary speaker, John Bercow, has warned Prime Minister Boris Johnson not to disobey the law by refusing to ask for a Brexit delay, and vowed to thwart any attempt to circumvent the legislation. Meanwhile, in Brussels, the EU chief Brexit negotiator Michael Barnier said that there was no reason to be optimistic about striking any divorce deal with Britain before a crucial October 17th to 18th EU summit. Now, there's so much that we can give more information to when it comes to the Brexit situation. Fred, very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us on the Big Ten. I should have said hi to you earlier. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right. Now, Fred, here's Boris Johnson, who has suspended the Parliament, a move that some people call term it illegal. He's been accused of lying to the Queen. So what is the scenario ahead of Britain as we race towards the 31st of October?
I think Boris Johnson is just playing smart politics as per his agenda that he wants, because pundits have it that all he wants is to get it over and done with. He is not interested in having a deal that is going to be favorable to the UK. Now, what that brings to fore is that there were several deals that the former Prime Minister had brought that were very good to the UK. Unfortunately, Boris Johnson, who was eyeing her position, marshaled enough members of Parliament, and they managed to shoot down 3 times what she had brought on table. Now it is his turn to swallow the same pill that he was taking the former Prime Minister through. And I think it's going to be very difficult on him.
All right, so I would like us to move on very swiftly on to the next number. Right now, the trade tensions between the United States of America and China appear to be simmering down. China said today that some U.S. agricultural products, including pork and soybeans, will be exempted from added tariffs ahead of trade talks between Beijing and Washington scheduled for October. Now, after an apparent conciliatory move by China, U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday made one of his own, announcing that he agreed to delay an increase in tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods by 2 weeks from October 1st to October 15th, Trump tweeted late on Wednesday. Speaking weeks ahead of the resumption of talks aimed at resolving a grinding trade war, Trump said the tariff delay was requested by, and I quote, the Vice Premier of China, Liu He, and due to the fact that the People's Republic of China will be celebrating their 70th anniversary on the 1st of October, end of quote. Top negotiators expect to reconvene in Washington early next month after an acrimonious summer in which trade relations deteriorated sharply and both governments announced waves of new tariffs in a standoff that is dragging on the global economy. Early on Wednesday, Beijing announced it was temporarily exempting some U.S. exports from tariff increases, a gesture that lifted equity markets long buffeted by the ups and downs in the conflict now entering its second year. The lists mark the first time Beijing has announced products to be excluded from tariffs, and other categories that will be spared include alfalfa pellets and fish feed, and the Commission said it was also considering further exemptions. Both sides imposed fresh tit-for-tat tariffs on the 1st of September, adding the duties that now cover hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods. Trump initiated the trade war, complaining that China engaged in unfair trade practices, but U.S. businesses in China are increasingly pessimistic about their prospects. A report released on Wednesday said growing numbers of companies expect their revenues and investment in the local market to shrink, and the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai's reported said 47% surveyed said they expected to increase their investments in China in 2019, down from 62% last year. Three-quarters of businesses surveyed said they oppose the use of punitive tariffs by the United States to force China into a trade deal. And China's economy grew to 6.2% on year in the second quarter, the lowest rate in early 3 decades, a fact Trump highlighted on Wednesday. Trump has said the protracted trade war is damaging China more than the United States, and China is, in a quote, eating the tariffs. But experts have warned there are signs the U.S. is also feeling the pinch, with job creation slowing across major industries last month. All right, now, do you see the U.S. China ceding further ground on their tariff war?
I'm optimistic that it should come to an end very soon. If the last week's whatever happened last week is anything to go by. So yes, I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
That it should.
All right, and about 150,000 jobs have already been lost in the U.S. And so, what are the wider implications of the U.S.-China tariff war on the global economy?
I think the U.S. need to trade carefully because, first of all, there are so many other countries that are interested in doing business with China to replace what the U.S. used to offer. Because you find that the Chinese market is larger by virtue of population. The Chinese have technology equivalent to that of U.S., if not superior. And also, the Chinese is fighting for the space to be like some form of a superpower. So they are also eyeing other markets. So I think the U.S. needs to trade carefully, and they need to come out honestly. And from what has transpired last week, I think they have already started seeing that this is not a war that they want to keep engaging in. And I think it is always important for countries to understand that you cannot force other countries to play ball. There are world laid down procedures that everybody needs to follow if the U.S. felt that China is engaging in unfair trade.
All right.
Yes.
And here you're talking about it's the U.S. that was forcing China to play ball.
Exactly.
All right. Moving on swiftly.
Yeah.
So Jack Ma stepped aside on Tuesday as chairman of Alibaba, ending a spectacularly successful 20-year run during which the charismatic former English teacher's e-commerce company left a profound impact on China's economy. Ma, who turned 55, handed over the reins of the company he co-founded to a team of executives led by CEO Daniel Zhang. Jack Ma's departure marks a new era for a company that tapped into China's deep reservoir of consumer spending, creating new opportunities for countless businesses, large and small, and helping cement the internet's central role in the Chinese daily life. His fluent English, globe-trotting, and playful antics, he channeled Michael Jackson in a dance routine 2 years ago, shattered the dry image of the Chinese business executive, presenting a charismatic face to the world. Jack Ma intends to put his 4.2 trillion shillings fortune toward philanthropic projects such as education, and Ma was a cash-strapped entrepreneur when someone showed him the internet in the 1990s trip to the United States. He launched various internet-related businesses projects in China that made a mixed success before convincing a group of Chinese and foreign friends to give him about 6 million shillings to start a business-to-business e-commerce venture called Alibaba in 1999. Today, Alibaba towers over Chinese e-commerce with more than half of domestic market share, international ambitions, and a dominant position in digital payments through affiliate and Ant Financial. US-listed Alibaba is now among the world's most valuable companies, worth 48 trillion shillings, according to Bloomberg data. Ma's successors face rising domestic competition, just as growth in consumer spending is slowing along with China's economy. Alibaba and its imitators, however, have been accused of fostering rampant consumerism, traffic in counterfeit goods, and producing mountains of packaging material refuse. Ma himself has drawn barbs, including after he recently dismissed concerns that Chinese workers were toiling excessive hours, and over the revelation last year that he was a Communist Party member. But he also has won plaudits for his philanthropy and modesty, frequently recounting how he was rejected by Harvard 10 times. Rejected by Harvard 10 times. This is a man of many firsts. He's well celebrated. You cannot think of e-commerce without thinking of Jack Ma. What lessons can we learn from him?
I think being one of the few Chinese, that's something I picked from him, who speaks fluent English, and you know how the Chinese and foreign language are. I think he teaches me that you are better off if you dare to dream and go against the norms, because if you go out there, you will find that wherever you are comfortable in is not the best place probably for you. This is a gentleman who was persistent in the things that he was doing. He was rejected somewhere 10 times, but he kept on, and you see what his persistence brought to him. Also, he was philanthropic. I know him for philanthropy. So don't just make profits and keep them all for yourself. Anyway, it's good to help out.
Yeah, it's good to help.
It is said that the hands that gives gets.
All right. Yeah. And it's impressive also. What impresses me is the fact that he knew when to leave.
Right, definitely. And that's something that most of African leaders in any part, whether it is political or it is in business, should learn that you must not die on the seat. You can just do something good, then leave at a good time.
All right, now let's leave this story on to the next. Some call him a true African and a revolutionary icon. For others, the name evokes only evil, destruction, and suffering. Thus, the mixed legacy that will follow Zimbabwe's former president, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, who died last Friday in Singapore, where he was receiving medical care. Now, Mugabe ruled Zimbabwe for 37 years, making him one of Africa's longest-serving presidents before being deposed by the military in 2017. Mugabe's rule took a dark turn in the early 1980s with the slaughter of thousands of civilians belonging to the ethnic group of a political rival. He then led a violent campaign against white farmers, many of whom backed the main opposition party, causing the collapse of agricultural production. Mugabe responded to the firming crisis and series of poor judged economic reforms by pumping cash into the economy. The resulting hyperinflation rendered the Zimbabwean currency worthless and plunged thousands into poverty. Zimbabwe's annual inflation rate hit 176% in June, the highest in the world after Venezuela, and close to 3 million Zimbabweans live abroad, according to the International Organization for Migration. They moved to neighboring South Africa and Botswana and further afield to Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States, among others.
Remember him as the towering leader of the struggle for independence of the people of Zimbabwe, but as an outstanding leader on the African continent. Yes, it is true, he was a hero to many Zimbabweans, but he was also of the name to others.
All right, there we have it. We was just saying the current president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, saying that he was a good leader. Now, this was a ruler that was at the forefront of the fight against white rule, and he formed the Zimbabwe African Union, that's ZANU. And he spent decades in prison, and at the same time, he was accused of being responsible for the slaughter of thousands of civilians belonging to an ethnic group of the rival political parties. So now, does he deserve the term revolutionary icon?
I will want you to tell me if that is true after I tell you what I know about Mugabe. One, the irony of him dying in Singapore, where he had turned to become a medical refugee in foreign lands after ruling for over 3 decades in a country where he couldn't seek medical attention. That should inform you of who he is. Robert Mugabe oversaw the killings of hundreds of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, it's undocumented about 20,000 in the it's called the Gukuramuni massacre of the 1983. So what will that inform you of that individual? If you look at the education sector in Zimbabwe, there is nothing that Robert Mugabe did well for Zimbabwe.
But there was a time when the education sector under his rule was doing very well, and he was even offering the free free health?
At that time, there was a time when he was perceived to be the God-sent ruler, and he was acting like one. But after he had overstayed and wanted to use all the instruments of power to amass wealth for himself and to stay there, like I was telling you, African leaders don't know when to leave. So he degenerated and became something else. So you want to be careful, because like a friend says, to many people, Robert Mugabe was very many things. It only depends with the person who is talking, whether you are a Zimbabwean or you are a non-Zimbabwean. Non-Zimbabweans might see the good side of him, but the real people who experienced the Robert Mugabe will tell you that he was not a revolutionary.
So we'll leave it at that.
I will leave him at that, to rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Staying on the continent, almost 200 Nigerian migrants were repatriated from South Africa on Wednesday following a wave of xenophobic violence that swept through the country and sparked sharp exchanges between the two countries. A flight carrying 189 Nigerians landed in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, with some of those on board punching the air and singing the national anthem while waving pictures of burnt shops. Now, more than 600 Nigerians are expected to return from South Africa this week, the Nigerian government has said. Johannesburg and the surrounding areas were rocked by a series of deadly attacks on foreigners last week, including many directed against Nigerian-owned businesses and properties. At least 10 people were killed in the violence and hundreds of shops destroyed, while more than 420 people were arrested. No Nigerians were killed, but the violence led to condemnation across Africa, particularly in Nigeria, fueling diplomatic tensions between the continent's top two leading nations. The violence also prompted reprisal attacks against South African firms in Nigeria and the temporary closing of South Africa's diplomatic missions in Lagos and Abuja. But South Africa's security ministers on Tuesday vowed to put an end to the hiring of undocumented foreign workers as the country tackles a wave of xenophobic attacks that claimed 12 lives. Defense Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula told journalists that security forces would clamp down on private business owners who do not abide by the labor and immigration laws. Now, the announcement was made as part of the plans to restore order after areas of Johannesburg were plunged into violence and dozens of shops destroyed in attacks on foreign-owned businesses and homes. Violence against foreigners has a long history in South Africa, where many scapegoat immigrants for the lack of job opportunities, particularly in manual labor. It is unknown how many foreigners are in South Africa illegally, but various reports claim the figure is in the millions. Officials had already charged 1,048 employers in the first 6 months of the year for breaching immigration laws, she added. More than half of those were in Gauteng province, the economic hub of the country, when Johannesburg is located. Now, Fred, what's your take on South Africa's policy when it comes to foreign workers, especially those originating from within the continent? Is it realistic?
I want to think that it might not, based on the frequent xenophobic attacks that we have witnessed. If you look at the recent xenophobic attacks and how it has been handled, then you look to the prior, especially the ones in 2008, 2009 there, you find that the leadership of South Africa is not doing much. And whereas we cannot lie that there are or there could be a challenge or a problem posed by illegal immigrants in South Africa, the manner in which it is being handled, straight from the top to the bottom, is not how we should handle Africans. We have so many problems even in this country. We have so many foreigners in this country, but you never see Kenyans taking up to the streets to beat other fellow Africans because the government has strict ways of ensuring that other people who come to your country, they do not come here because they are happy. There are reasons that will make someone leave their home country to go and get greener pastures elsewhere. Now, if you look at what happened, and I was following a tweet by Yvonne Chakachaka, and she tweeted that is it her or her daughter's shop which was looted also. So she found herself within the mix. So there is more that goes into the so-called xenophobic attacks. I don't think it's only xenophobic. I think South Africans, the unemployed, the downtrodden are just venting out, and it is upon their government to find out why they are feeling so angry at anyone and everyone in South Africa.
All right.
Yes.
And with that said, it's getting a bit hot, and we'd like to get a glass of water. So let's quickly take a quick break, and we shall be back with more.